We're about halfway through this season now. Could you give us a grade on Macdonald and Schneider?
Yeah, I mean, they're in a rut right now. I mean, there's no way around that. Defensively, it's been a little bit disappointing. I would say if I was going to give them a grade, I would probably say a C plus, B minus. I think there is more talent than the record would indicate. But there's an adjustment period, just as I was talking about the Chargers kind of taking a minute to find their explosive identity offensively. Seattle's they've got to figure it out. They've tried swapping out some personnel on defense. I think you got to be patient with them. I believe in the coach. I believe in the general manager. Now it's just a matter of them spending enough time together and having enough, acquisition time to fill in the needs that they have.
What does an in-season move of cutting your leading tackler say to Daniel Jeremiah?
Not good enough. Just what the standard is, and it's not good enough. And it also says, and look, it's early to be waving the white flag, but it also says we want to give opportunities to those that we think can be a part of this when we're winning, when we're a championship caliber team. Like, who are the guys on this team that are going to be a member of that team? And if you look at it and say, okay, well, this guy might be the best that we have right now, but he's not going to be good enough for us to be a championship level team. Let's get a look at some other guys and try and figure out who is going to be on that, on that roster.
Is this a rebuilding year for the Seahawks? Kurt Menefee came on with us on Monday, and it was interesting. We're so close to this, right? You get a little more global look than we do, as we're so hyper-focused, largely on our one team. And Kurt's like, well, this is a rebuilding year. I mean, anytime you make a coaching change, it is a rebuilding year. Do you feel like 9 games in, midway point, pushing the second half, that's a fair characterization for the Seahawks and any team that is making a move and has made a move with their head coach?
I don't think that was the intent. And there's a lot of veterans on this roster, a lot of good veteran players, even though they got some good young guys as well. But I think the intent was we're going to make some changes, coaches, scheme, and we're going to be a playoff team right now. I think that was where the expectation was, and they've shown glimpses of being that type of team. But I also think there's the fact you've got to adjust as you're going throughout the year, and as you're going throughout the year, you're saying, okay, well, maybe this isn't a perfect marriage between the personnel that we have and the way we want to play. So I think it'd be dumb to just continue rolling the same guys out there and not be realistic about where you are and say, okay, let's turn our eyes a little bit towards next year into the future, and let's try and figure out exactly what we have here.
One of the challenges I'm having is just looking at their offseason acquisition list, and Brock and I were kind of going through it earlier. It's kind of a rough look. Leonard Williams was here. They signed him. That one was certainly a positive. But then you start kind of going through, and it's, Laken Tomlinson and Connor Williams, both of whom Brian Baldinger said last week look like backups in the NFL, and neither of whom has played particularly well. It's, defensively, Rayshon Jenkins, who's...
Oh, good job.
Thank you, Brock. I got it right this time.
Yes, you did.
But I don't know that he's ever going to play for this team again, and it seems like they're sort of
Dodson,
happy to have replaced him.
Baker,
2 linebackers are both gone. George Fant's been injured the entire year. The draft, I mean, Byron Murphy's been good. Jared Verse has maybe been better, and maybe so has Johnny Newton. Your second-round pick didn't exist. Third-round pick was the guard who's been unable to beat out Anthony Bradford. Like, it's kind of a tough look at this particular offseason for John Schneider.
Yeah, I think there's some lessons you can pull from that. I'd be curious to see how much familiarity they had with all those players and connections they had to those players with their coaches. I always go back to what Ozzie used to say in Baltimore, which was, hey, we have coaches, they coach, scouts, they scout, and there's a belief in that you kind of separate that a little bit. But there's just too much history of guys where you see successful free agent additions usually have some connection, some experience level in the scheme or with the coaches, or there's a connection, and you just have a better ability to fit them in once they come in. And I don't know how many of those names. I mean, I'd have to go back through and search the history and the connections, but it didn't seem like a lot of connective tissue on those guys. Whereas, I see it with the when you look at the Chargers, not only, and everybody's going to point to like former Ravens, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, like guys who have ties to the Ravens. I mean, when you hired the secondary coach from Notre Dame and you go out and you get Cam Hart in the 5th round as a corner who's starting and playing great because you had experience and intimate knowledge of him and how he would fit into the techniques and the defense that you want to play. So I do think there is something to having some connective tissue there. So you guys tell me. I just listening to that did not feel like I could do the easy math and connect a lot of those guys.
There was some, and certainly with Noah Fant resigning and keeping Leonard Williams and bringing back George Fant. I mean, there was some, but yeah, I think to that point. And
Not
it's
much.
It's something Salk has kind of talked about a ton. Is just like, man, there wasn't anybody from Baltimore. Right, there weren't many, and obviously you have a college OC in Grubb and a college O-line coach that don't have that connective tissue in the NFL. So, yeah, I think a lot of it has been trying to kind of learn a little bit on the job between both sides.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, it's not, again, I think you can have connection to guys at college with position coaches. You can have, a lot of different ways you can, have that inside information. But, like I can just speak on a couple of the guys. Like I was around, or I've watched a lot of Laken Tomlinson. I saw him, go from the Niners to the Jets and the investment that was made there, and he did not play well there. So that would have been a very low expectation that was going to improve. Rayshawn Jenkins has bounced around. I was with him with the Chargers for several years. I think there's some limitations there as well. He is first one off the bus. I mean, he looks fantastic, just the size and the speed. He's just not an instinctive player. And, at the safety position, I would argue that's probably the most important trait to possess. So a couple of those, look, John's done an unbelievable job. If you look at his overall track record throughout his career of identifying and bringing in talent. But we had an old scout that used to say when I was in Baltimore and, we'd be going through and ranking players and he'd have one guy that he would just be way off on. And instead of fighting the entire room and saying he was right, he would, this will tell you his age. He goes, "Hey guys, Ted Williams struck out every now and then."
Are you a road not traveled guy as a scout or as a person who's involved in, making decision on acquisition? Do you tend to look at, decisions you could have made and try to figure out how they've panned out later, or is that just a waste of time kind of exercise?
I think there's value in that. I think the most important thing you can do as a personnel department is to look at the guys that you did bring in, the guys that you did rank high, the guys that you did sign off on, and find out why that didn't work. I think it's a lot harder to see players go elsewhere that you didn't pick and see success or failure, and then try and figure out your process, how it was right or wrong, because you don't know that dynamic that they went into, which could have greatly enhanced them or could have suppressed whatever chance that they had. What you do know is you do know your infrastructure. You do know how your team, functions and is built. And if you made a miscalculation on bringing a guy in, I think that's where you should spend the bulk of your time trying to figure out what went right or what went wrong.
Well, what's gone wrong, unfortunately, is a lot of this offensive line over the years. And Baldinger, again, was on with us last week and just said it bluntly, DJ. He's like, well, they look like a bunch of backups. I mean, other than Cross, they just look like and are playing like a bunch of backups in this league, which, Salk and I got into yesterday. And maybe my number's too high, so I don't want to tell you what my number was and bias it all. But I'm kind of curious, if there's 32 NFL offensive lines, how many of them are, I don't know, 20, 30, 40% full of backups?
Oh, man. Of the 32, well, I think it's the least talented position group in the NFL. I think it's the most lopsided in terms of who you go against and, like the defensive line talent versus the offensive line talent. There's been a major discrepancy there for a long time. But I would say, the goal, my philosophy on offensive line has never changed, which is the goal should not be to have 5 greats. It's to be as strong as your weakest link. So to just be as balanced across the board as you can. If that's 5 B-level players, that'd be fantastic. You can't have, as we will call them, a tomato can out there. And you sure as heck can't have multiple tomato cans out there that are just throwing batting practice. So I would say if you're going to stack up the 32 offensive lines, this is off the top of my head, I would say there's probably 8 really good offensive lines, and that might be on the high end, maybe between 5 and 8 really good offensive lines. The bulk of the teams are somewhere, from, where you've got maybe one guy that you're trying to hide, maybe 1.5, 2 guys. And then you've got really there's 5 or 6 teams that are just egregiously bad.
Well, you're being generous, Brock, with the 30-40%. Baldinger's at 80%.
Well, I mean, Abe Lucas is going to come back.
Okay, that would be 60%.
And yeah.
That's not 30 to 40. I mean, according to Baldinger, you're at 60 to 80% of your offensive line that he thinks is backup quality.
But here's the challenge, though, and Brock, I'll hit you with this. Like when I was working on advanced scouting reports for the teams that you're getting ready to play, when I was in office working on the pro side, we would always go I wanted to be able to tell the coach, this is the corner, when they've got nickel out there, of those 3 guys, this is the one you want to attack. And on the offensive side of the ball, I wanted to be able to circle, one lineman that, okay, if we got a defensive lineman, we have somebody like Trevor Price that can play inside and outside. This week, I've let him just beat up this left guard. He stinks. Or maybe it's this week, he can go after this right tackle. When you have to debate which of the matchups you like more, when you're looking at the offensive line, that's when you've got a big problem.
Hey, you said earlier that we don't have enough offensive linemen. I think that's been pretty well established. Do we have enough offensive coordinators who can really do the job? And, I kind of ask that in conjunction with where some of these young quarterbacks are at and seeing what happened in Chicago this past week, and that's not the only story. Are we failing some of these young quarterbacks partially because there aren't enough great offensive coordinators?
So this is interesting you say that, because I personally believe that for a long time, that, some guys just don't have a chance, because of the situations they go into. But I felt incapable of saying it, because you know what that sounds like? It sounds like the draft guy who's trying to excuse away how bad he whiffed on a quarterback, But then Kevin O'Connell, God bless him, the thank you cards in the mail, when you get a head coach in the NFL who comes out and says publicly more organizations fail quarterbacks than quarterbacks fail organizations. I feel like there is some validity to that. So I don't think you can just absolve all these quarterbacks of blame. Caleb's a great example of that. He's doing a lot of things poorly right now, and he needs to get better at that. But you also have to be in a place where they can set you up for success. And we've always said, like Bucky and myself on our podcast, we kind of came up with this years ago and just said, if you look at the 3 Ps for a young quarterback, that you have to have a chance. It's play caller, it's protection, it's playmakers. And if you look at the ones that have really failed and see, but do they have those 3 things in place? A lot of times they're missing 2, if not all 3.
But then you take a Brock Purdy versus Trey Lance, right? Same team, same play caller, same protection, same playmakers. One of them makes it go, it is fit. So here's a question for you with the Seahawks playing the 49ers, kind of a burning question, not an easy one. If you could take your pick to play this season, Geno Smith or Brock Purdy? If you had your pick of quarterback, and then on top of that, if it was Geno in San Francisco the last 3 years and not Brock Purdy, is Geno doing everything that Brock Purdy has done?
So that's the more important question, because to me, anytime you're saying, would you take this quarterback or that quarterback, you can't remove them from their situation. Okay. I would rather have Brock Purdy with Kyle than to have Geno with Grubb at this point in time, just in terms of how hand in glove that fit is. I would like to tell you that I would lean towards saying I think if Geno had just been in Shanahan's system that he would be doing the same things that Purdy's doing. I would like to believe that. I can't say it with certainty and know it for sure. But man, that is I think from his skills would marry up pretty well with what they do up there in San Francisco.
Aaron Rodgers done?
I think so. I think it might have been done for a while. We just didn't really want to admit it. And now there's nothing good to pull from it. It's gone from, wow, this is not good, to, man, is this going to get better, to Monday morning, I'm just not even going to watch this tape. I already know what it is. I don't want to spend that time watching it. It's just like you need a palate cleanser when you get done with it. So I really haven't watched the Jets the last couple of weeks, to be honest with you.